Welcome to At Your Doorstep. My name is Kaylee Nix, and I'll be your host. This is the visual complement to the newest FreightWaves brand, Modern Shipper. On this show, we'll be exploring the world of the gig economy, last mile delivery, and the tech that is driving the future of delivery. It's time to thank our sponsor, Amazon Freight, who knows you need more than another logistics truckload service provider. You need a partner who can help you navigate the world of logistics. Amazon Freight is helping shippers move their freight to Amazon facilities and off Amazon simply and reliably, while backed by the innovation and expertise that's in the DNA of Amazon. Whether you have a few truckloads to fill or a few thousand to move, Amazon Freight is your opportunity to put Amazon to work for you. Visit freight.amazon.com to get started. Planning an urban center is extremely difficult. Trying to plan an urban center while forecasting what the future of delivery is going to look like in that urban center makes it 10 times harder. But companies like Urban Footprint are working on making that planning a little bit easier. Today we're talking with Josh Goldstein. He's Director of Business Development at Urban Footprint, about what they do and how they're making that planning process seamless for urban centers. Josh, thanks for joining me today on At Your Doorstep.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So before we get started, go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself, your role at Urban Footprint, and what you guys do as a company.
Awesome. So like you said, I'm Director of Business Development and Partnerships at Urban Footprint, and we're kind of obsessed with one major problem, which is how to empower the world's transition to net zero and resilience economy. So in the coming years and decades, every company, city, organization has to successfully navigate this transition. And a lot of the tools that we need to make this transition are siloed, right? So climate data, hazard risk data, community data, data about the built environment. And so Urban Footprint is a platform that unifies these data sets. And we work with cities, energy utilities, financial institutions, mobility companies, to really answer that question of where to invest, where to deploy resources down to the neighborhood level. And my job's really fun because I get to work on applying this platform to a range of customers and new customer segments, including what we're going to talk about today, which is taking our intelligence from the ground into the air.
So talk to me a little bit about the actual process you guys do of really unsiloing that data. How are you making that accessible to your clients?
Yeah, so our platform is really built on helping cities and the companies that work in cities make critical decisions at that intersection I mentioned of climate, community, and the built environment. And so to give you two really concrete examples, we work with a lot of cities about looking at where they should build affordable housing in the next decade. Where I live in Los Angeles, for example, they need to build almost 500,000 new houses by 2029, new homes. And so our platform allows a kind of funnel analysis to say, okay, maybe the city wants to look at commercial, office, vacant, a certain access to transit corridor. Maybe they want to avoid high risk fire zones or flood zones, and sort of digging into that at a super granular level across specific neighborhoods and specific zones to help essentially optimize that decision for a city. And the other example I think that's relevant here is that this same process is relevant to micromobility providers and others who need to make decisions about the built environment. So micromobility providers, looking at optimizing where charging stations need to be located or where dock stations need to be located. Many cities, for example, have a goal of optimizing the number of households within a 30-minute transit ride, to an office, or 10 minutes to, parks, schools, retail. Running the scenarios, understanding the various options, understanding how this impacts equity. These are the types of questions we look at and try to help our customers and the broader community unpack.
So some of the most successful cities in the world, and even from my experience traveling to those cities, are cities that have that equitable access to public transit. That way they get more cars off the road, they create an easier space for people to get around, right? And the same can be said for delivery vehicles. And so You guys took a look at using drones as delivery vehicles, but not necessarily in a city environment, correct? In a rural environment. Can you tell me a little bit about your guys' findings using that drone delivery?
Absolutely. This is a really fun area that we're excited to work on. Where this comes out of a larger body of work that's partly supported by NASA to look at what urban planning means in a future of urban air transit. And so, in this post in particular, we looked at rural last mile delivery, and we explored how essentially the last mile operators and the municipalities uh, can answer a number of questions. One, what is the optimal sort of target at the community level for things like vaccine and medicine delivery? We were particularly looking at those um, as opposed to more general last mile delivery, but I think the same principle applies. The second is low altitude airspace route planning. Where should these drones be flying? And the third is site selection and operational planning. So, where do warehouses need to be located? How do you think about the different options there? And I think the bigger picture is that, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but in say the next 3 to 5 years, the airspace is going to get crowded. And so there are a lot of different players in the space, from the companies to regulators to cities, who are grappling with what that's going to mean and what their role is going to be in that ecosystem.
That makes sense. And so you guys took a look at that rural space, but are drones actually a viable option for those folks? Does the cost outweigh the benefit of flying a drone? Say if you've got a county hospital that needs 18 doses of a COVID vaccine, but your nearest urban center is 50 miles away. Are the costs better than the benefits to fly that? Maybe if there's traffic on the interstate or something and they can't get that out to that county hospital?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's important to emphasize that how early we are in this. Really, what's happening in the air, so to speak, is a series of pilots around this, largely funded by the FAA's integration pilot program and others. And so, we're really still figuring this out. We cited a report by Deloitte that showed air delivery in some of these areas would be almost 2 orders of magnitude cheaper than premium ground shipping, for example. But it really depends on the dynamics, and a lot of that also is um, making a number of assumptions at the regulatory level. So it's going to be exciting to see how it plays out.
So you talk about that regulatory level. Are you guys seeing any indications by any city, state, or even federal governments about any possible plans to mitigate drone traffic? Because it seems like, there's a drone traffic jam isn't something that's on people's radar right now, but you mentioned
Yeah.
that 3 to 5 year space. What type of regulations would really need to be put in place to kind of mitigate that?
Yeah, it's super interesting to think through because we're really in this almost policy entrepreneurial space where cities are testing things, exploring options. I think it's worth stepping back and saying what is actually going to be in the air, right? So obviously, there's last mile delivery. There's a number of surveillance and kind of drone, tracking operations around, you know, um, farming and other agriculture in various other industries, construction. And then, of course, there's air taxis in terms of moving humans to different places. So, we think about it on one hand, there are a lot more planes or dimensions to operate in. But on the other hand, it's not clear yet who is going to be managing that. So the Airbuses of the world, air maps, there's a number of players developing air traffic management tools. Obviously, the FAA will help shape this environment. At the city level, I think it's really, really ripe for leaders to start exploring what this is going to mean, specifically around zoning. So right now, if you asked a major city where they could zone for, last mile delivery, um, there's pretty much nothing in the regulatory code that would answer that question. There's maybe something about helicopters or other sorts of things, but the types of questions around what can you fly over, what can you not fly over, can you go over schools? These things are still in their earliest days, and I think the cities that move first are going to help set the standard in the space.
So it almost seems like cities are going to need to take a utilization of like employing their own city air traffic controllers, basically, if it's left up to that city by city case basis, which I guess if I'm thinking right, it wouldn't necessarily be like a state regulated or a federally regulated because it would have to be on such a city specific basis, correct?
Well, I would frame it a little bit differently. I do think there will be standards at a national level. I just don't know who's going to be. It probably won't look and feel the same way that passenger air travel looks today. It may be more automated. It may be more decentralized. I don't think it will be, hopefully, on a city or state by state basis. I guess it could be. That would be challenging for the operators, obviously. Um, but I think there is a uh, key key element that cities do control, which is routes, which is where you can fly over the zoning, um, and what that's going to look like is going to vary for sure on a city and sort of regional basis.
So in my brain, I'm picturing basically like a scene from the Jetsons. Like you've got flying cars going every which way in between city buildings, and then maybe at a lower level, you've got the drones flying every which way on their own routes, and then step up, you've got the small passenger aircraft, and then another step up, you've got the large passenger aircraft for long distance air travel, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking, and it really is kind of difficult to try and navigate that space, and you can't exactly put stoplights up in the air, so you're really going to have to think about controlling the way that that traffic interacts with each other more than you would on a roadway, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. I think there's going to be a lot of automation. I think there's going to be a lot of default rules around what the distances are, routes and these sorts of things. So, but I think the way you described it is accurate in that certain vehicles, are going to be operating in different air bands.
And so we're talking about the automation of air vehicle delivery, and that's a little bit far in the future. You mentioned that 3 to 5 year timeline. Right now, though, we're looking at autonomous vehicles, and I watched a video the other day of someone ordering a Waymo in California that took them to Costco, navigated the city streets, and it was the passenger view of the Waymo. That's cool, and that's happening right now as we speak. Have you guys at Urban Footprint done any research, any planning about the way that cities are planning to utilize those AVs?
Um, we've explored it. I think it fits into this larger context of transit mobility planning, maximizing the options, around a hub and spoke type model, whether it's scooters or, you know, um, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. I think cities are very concerned about the future of what their streets are going to look like and how people are going to get around. There's increasing focus on the equity side of it, and so I think it's the timing of autonomy is always a perennial challenging question. But I think cities are starting to get ready for that and to understand, is that something that, has some of the, has its own lanes? Is it something that, has certain fixed routes? And, I think it's going to be an important part of the, um, of the overall transportation ecosystem in cities. And we're also going to start getting autonomy in the air as well, in terms of small air taxis that can bring people there. That's maybe a few a little bit further out, but it's going to change the dynamics, especially around one thing we look at a lot is the link between mobility and housing, especially here in California, where I am. There's a major housing crisis, and the distance that it takes to get to where you need to go is a key factor, right? So if you can, one set of solutions is about increasing density and making it possible for more people to live in high demand places, but um, another set of solutions is shrinking the time and the space it takes to get where you need to go, which makes it a little bit broader in terms of where folks can live.
And so, if we're talking about housing crisis, solving people's problems, a lot of this work is going to have to be done in the actual physical infrastructure of cities, right? Whether that's changing the way that streets are laid out, changing how wide bike lanes are, separating those own individual lanes for those AVs, like we were talking about. Should cities, if they're not already making these plans for these modifications, should they start looking at this now, or is it too late? Should they have started 2 years ago?
Oh, they need to look at it now, and I think many are starting to look at it now. Um, I think I think voters are demanding that they look at it now. You know, and again, like a lot of the things that are most salient, in terms of what a local elected official gets in their inbox every day, um, it's phrased in different ways, but it's tied to this core problem. I need to get around better and faster, and I need the basics in my life, housing and other things, to cost less money. And so, that cities are a long game, right? They're kind of this infinite game where you have to the investments that you make now aren't going to show up this year, right? In general, and so it's almost like cities have to look at this as a bundle of investments, in terms of making some of these options possible. What's really interesting to me is the tie to the green transition, which is changing the debate in some ways because it's allowing the places where kind of the where cities can make decisions that kind of lower the quote unquote green premium, right? Which make it, the difference between, something that a form of transportation that emits CO2 versus not, and making it easier to go the green route, whether that's charging stations, whether that's, you know, reducing bicycle fatalities, right? There's a huge bundle of things that cities need to do to make this happen.
So I know in California specifically, California is one of those states where the whole carpool idea was really encouraged, right? That was, I guess you'd say, mid 2000s. People were like, carpool to be greener, to save energy, to create less fossil fuels by less cars out on the road. And I guess, would you say that that's kind of the same push that we're going to have to make, is encouraging people to choose these options of, hey, ride your bike to work or maybe take public transit, but we can't encourage those people to do that until the options are there for them to do that, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always going to be a fringe option until it sort of competes on that, you know, whether it's a green premium or a time premium, right? That's going to be key. And I think I think one thing we've seen that, local elected officials and city managers are seeing is that different people are motivated by different things. So some people, it may be an equity issue, right? Like they want more affordable housing in their community and more transportation options for the teachers and the firefighters who serve their community to be able to live and move near and closer to those places. Some people are motivated by more like aesthetic motivations, and some people are motivated by the climate and the green economy. So I think it's the job of cities and states to essentially build those coalitions, and motivate people in different ways.
All right, last one I've got for you. COVID has kind of driven people out of cities, right? We've seen this sort of, I would almost call it a rural migration of people leaving the big city because they've got the ability to work from home and they want to take their family and put them where there's more land, more space, less people, right? Do you think that that kind of rural migration will create more space for these cities to grow in a better way? Is people leaving the city, less people occupying, going to give the city its own space to breathe and make these modifications so that more people can come back in a better, greener, and more equitable way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think we know. I'm happy to speculate, which is that um, I think the appeal of being with other human beings is not going away, and that so while there may be a temporary reduction, I'm not sure how long term that will be. I think there's still always going to be a very strong appeal to cities. I'm actually more concerned about a different flavor of the problem, which is a lot of the places where the most opportunity is. Lower income people are priced out and are moving out of the state permanently. So for all the high profile coverage that Elon Musk, going to Texas gets, that rich people moving out of California is a tiny percentage of the outgrowth, which is or the outbound movement, and more people are lower income, and so to make these places appealing for lower income households over the long term, I think is key, and it's going to take a lot of changes in terms of policy and the broader sort of regulatory approach.
Going to be something that we are going to continuously watch. I know that I am super, super excited about it, and maybe we'll have to do some follow-ups with Urban Footprint. If people want to learn more a little bit about you guys or hear from you yourself, Josh, where should we send them?
We're at urbanfootprint.com, and yeah, love to interact on Twitter, the UF platform, and anywhere else we can engage.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today at Your Doorstep. This was awesome, and I'm glad to have had you on.
This is so fun. Thanks again.
If you enjoyed our conversation today, you can find more stories like this on modernshipper.com. Here's some of today's top headlines. The future of warehousing lives in automation, but of the estimated 200 billion square feet of warehouse space around the world, only 5% of that is automated. CEO of Locus Robotics discusses what it will take to spread the automation trend and how COVID played a part in making that trend a reality. Uber has announced a $250 driver stimulus boost in an attempt to lure drivers back into the service. Boosted incentives and guarantees will help welcome existing drivers back to Uber and ensure that first-time drivers do well as they learn the ropes, wrote Dennis Sinelli, Vice President of U.S. and Canadian Mobility for Uber. During the pandemic, Uber saw a big hit as driver service fell off, but they're hoping to get more people back into the service with this pay incentive. Alec McGillis wrote a critically acclaimed book, Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One-Click America. He's a reporter at investigative journalism platform ProPublica and a freelance journalist for other publications. And he's defragmenting the Amazon system in his article that he wrote online and his interview that he did on modernshipper.com. If you enjoy all of these headlines, make sure that you sign up for the Modern Shipper newsletter. You can do that at modernshipper.com. You can also catch At Your Doorstep every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and listen everywhere that you find your podcasts.